Greetings and good morning on this Sunday morning, the 3rd of April. I am Pastor Carrie West, and this is our morning brief. This is just a few minutes for me to share a little bit about what the sermon will entail, but especially to add a little bit background to the sermon, things that I just choose not to necessarily go into in the sermon. Today is less about the sermon other than just kind of a look at the season of Lent. So at Sunrise Church here, we do observe a Holy Lent, which is like the 46 days leading up to Easter. And this has been a long time tradition in the Christian church, is to spend intentional time preparing ourselves for what we as Christians consider like the greatest celebration of all, which is the resurrection of Jesus, or as you know, if you don't know the word resurrection, that Jesus came alive from the dead. We can get into all kinds of theological debates about that, but the idea is, we want to prepare ourselves to understand the power of God that brings new life into situations, people, whatever that we would think were dead, that seems that death has overcome. And so in the season of Lent, we kind of try to intentionally place ourselves in a place of letting go of things, of trying to get rid of some of the ways in which we miss the mark or sin. And in a sense, that's a way of us experiencing a little bit of death, right? To change our ways, to kind of let go of old teachings, to say, gosh, God, I'm not where I should be, and I want to become different, but that means we have to do something new, which means we have to let go of something old. And so that's the season of Lent, very simplified, and there's even more to it. But I just want to hold this idea that we need to do this intentional work in order that we may truly understand what new life is. We get very scared about the idea of death at times. But this whole season of moving toward Easter, and then the Easter story, is that we do not have to be afraid of death. God has conquered that fear in the resurrection of Jesus. So this morning we're going to hear from John's Gospel, and we're going to hear a story in which Jesus really teaches us something about death. And John has chosen this to tell this story in such a way that we can rethink what death is like, and how there is hope and there is power in the resurrection. So what I want to say also is that the interesting thing with John's gospel is that John is writing on his deathbed. Talk about that. Death, physical death, is imminent. And this is the lens in which we hear John talk about Jesus and the different stories, the things that stood out to him, which are so much different than the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Because John is in a whole different place than the other gospel writers, both physically and really spiritually, because he's nearing death. And so he's thinking about all these things that Jesus had done, all these things Jesus had said, all the interactions that really point to what John believes in his gospel is that first of all, Jesus is the Messiah. Second of all, Jesus is the one who is going to make things right in the world, that Jesus is the one who is going to bring people into new life, that Jesus is the embodiment of resurrection while he was alive, but especially after his death, that Jesus is going to be the way that everyone would have a chance for new life. So as you're looking at John's gospel, you can see this theme throughout his writings. So in this story that we're going to hear this morning is the story where Mary comes and pours perfume on Jesus's feet and wipes it off with her hair. And in this moment here, we are invited by John, the writer, to imagine the beauty that comes with death. And the only reason why we can see the beauty is because Jesus says, she's preparing me for burial. And we know that Jesus has risen because we know the rest of the story. And so there's this beauty, this fragrance that comes when we allow ourselves to pass to die to something, right? When we allow ourselves to let go of bad habits or sin, however you want to talk about it, when we allow ourselves to let that part of ourselves die, then we can replace it with this fragrant new life. And this is what Jesus is inviting those who were around watching Mary pour this perfume on his feet. So the invitation is ours as well. And I'll say this in the sermon again. So if you are listening and you hear the sermon later, you'll hear this again. But John tells the story as that it's Mary, who is the sister of Lazarus, who had died, and then Jesus raised him from the dead. And this is significant because that's not the storyline, excuse me, in other gospels. And this is significant because Lazarus then had died, and we are told in his death story that the tomb was really stinky. There was a really bad stench, and so death just didn't smell good. And it was probably only days after the resurrection of Lazarus that Jesus is in their home and Mary's pouring perfume. And so there's this idea that Jesus's death is going to overcome the stench of death, that the perfume had filled the house with such fragrance that everyone could smell it, right? So it's such a beautiful, there's beautiful elements of this story today that are really just enables us to imagine that in this season of Lent, we can let go. In the season of Lent, we can understand that we can make changes in our lives. We can identify our sin, know we are forgiven, and live fully into the fragrance of the new life being offered to us. So that's there's a little bit more in the sermon to share, but I've kind of given you a lot. I invite you to enjoy this day and to see the beauty that is all around us, to remember that Jesus indeed has overcome death for us so that we would not fear, but live into the newness that God is presenting to us all the time. So I hope to see you in church. If you are not in the area or not able to come today, we will be live streaming our services, and you can get the rest of the story as you would. And I just want you to enjoy the beauty of this spring and look at all the new life that is springing up around us. May the rest of your day be the very best of your day, and God bless you.